The other big area that people cite that's using quite a bit from a shopping perspective is the idea of taking pictures. Again, no big surprise. About 39-40% of these Canadians, they take pictures of mainly the product or the price, and then they refer to it later. Now, if we look at actually what are they doing with those pictures, other than referring to it later, are they actually sharing those pictures? So overall, the camera usage is very high. I mean, as we've mentioned there in terms of taking pictures, but sharing really varies widely across the different groups. And if we look at Engine, for example, it's 70% of the time, but really a great portion of that is actually in person. So they're taking pictures and they're actually sharing it with whoever it might be after the fact and doing a lot of it in person, although they do scale up a lot higher than, for example, boomers in terms of sharing pictures via their mobile device. The one thing I wanted to point out is in the picture there I show in a circle what's basically the QR code or quick response code. And again, this is an incredibly hot topic right now in the mobile space. And the one thing about the QR code is that, there's a lot of talk about it replacing barcodes. It's very big in other places in the world, such as Asia and Europe. Hasn't really taken hold in Canada or North America. You're seeing a lot of tests out there about it. But again, the idea behind it is there, and I'm actually going to talk a little bit later about what I believe is there's an education gap going on of people actually using or actually interacting with something like a QR code, for example. So there's more pictures going on than there's QR codes. But I really think that when I look towards kind of what's next or what's the real future hold, I'm not really totally convinced it's actually barcodes or QR codes in that case. I think probably the real opportunity is something like image recognition. So Google Goggles is an example of that. Simply put, Google is working on an application. It works on a mobile device where you simply hold your phone up to a product. In this case, it's a bottle of wine. Take a picture of it. Google searches their image database and returns a result that matches that image. You can imagine the possibilities of something like this. No longer you'll have to go to your application to check the weather. You might just hold your phone up to the sky and take a picture and get reports of the weather. Another company, SnapTel, which actually got purchased by Amazon a couple of years ago, has actually been pretty successful with this. They actually focus, they have broader campaigns that they do, but they also focus heavily on sort of the book side of things. You can actually go to a local bookstore, pull out the SnapTel application, point it at the book, and you'll get all kinds of reviews and ratings about that book fed through Amazon, all by just taking a picture of the actual image itself. So, I mean, this again, very new things. Most Canadians, when you look at them, they haven't even really heard of and tried these things before, but I think this is potentially something that could break that barrier.
It's also something that's quite something out of the ordinary for the retailers, that someone's in the store taking a picture of a book on their shelves, and then they find out that it's cheaper just down the street. So there's a possibility of losing sales here.
Next up is m-commerce, and this is something that is an incredibly hot topic. So, when we look at, people are saying they're using their smartphone, around 40% of the time during the shopping process. That obviously intrigued us a lot, and it really got into the fact of, okay, what are you doing with it? And I've already shared with you the sharing pictures, looking at the GPS, and we dig into that. It's a lot to do with the advance of the purchase, so advance of going to the store. They're using it in greater portion of doing those activities, much like you would in a traditional, you sit at your laptop or your desktop and you do some research before you actually go to the store. So we already know that that's happening and influencing purchase decisions. We're seeing the same sort of behavior translate to the web. Now, that being said, there's many industry researchers and experts that are really saying that m-commerce is really starting on that tipping point. I think they've been saying that for a while, but this is something where I think they might be on something now. And the reason why is the smartphone penetration is obviously increasing very quickly, and the capabilities of these devices is expanding very quickly as well, and also the experience they provide. But I think the big telling sign is that you're seeing this idea of, even downloading things like ringtones, which has been around for some time, and purchasing through your carrier's account. But now the advent of things like iTunes and app stores and those kinds of things, the amount of transactions that are going on in these microtransactions or these mobile commerce transactions is very significant. Now we're still not seeing a huge significance of people, and I show the Sears to Go app here as an example of the ability to kind of buy via your mobile device. And many organizations and retailers, lots of them have something similar to this, but you're able to actually purchase the device or purchase the product via your mobile device. But a physical device, we're still only seeing somewhere in the neighborhood, and this is North American numbers, around 6% actually purchasing physical goods. And there seems to be some correlation to the fact of this instant gratification. And what I mean by that is ringtones and apps and music, there's an instant gratification. I buy it, I get it, I use it right now. The physical goods, there's still some wait and see before you actually get it. So you buy it and you have to wait and see. Not to mention, too, the experience of many of these applications still is not as good as it really needs to be, and also there's some question of where do you pick it up and those kinds of things. However, that all being said, if any of you are of my age, might remember in Canada there's something called consumers distributing many years ago, where you would show up at a depot, essentially a consumers distributing depot, and they were kind of a catalog, if you will, and you would basically write the number of the product down, and you would head over to the counter and pick it up. You could start to see that the mobile device could start to do similar types of activities within retail stores, and you could actually see people walking around, and a retail store becomes more of a showcase. And it's like, oh, I like that, I like that, I like that, I like this. And then you go to a specific counter and actually pick those things up versus having to carry them around in a shopping cart and so on and so forth. Just a thought, just that idea, but you can see there's some penetration of that going on. So the other thing I want to cover off is this idea of sort of personal or social usage, and this seems to come up again pretty high as well. So as I mentioned before about where to use your mobile phone, we've talked about home, we've talked about shopping. I'm not going to really get into the work aspect that's on the actual chart there, just because the work is mainly due to a lot of people have their device via work, so it's actually a work device that they actually own. But we start talking about personal usage of it, and we look at things like, in transit as a passenger, might be out with friends at a restaurant, in transit as the driver. Now, I'll tell you, that one scares me a little bit, and hopefully the next set of data, which we're running currently, will show that number decreasing, because that's a pretty high number.
That's against the law.
Yes, it is. And then the other thing, obviously, in a movie theater, and it's really interesting there when you look at the younger generation, the N generation there, almost a 25% there actually using within a movie theater to communicate, mainly with their friends and so on and so forth. But the idea of Canadians reporting they're using it for 25% of the time for fun or simply passing the time. I mean, this is pretty significant in terms of this idea of downtime or me time. Often we talk about here as the in-between activities. So you're standing in line for something, you're, again, in transit, you're waiting. You're doing a lot of these activities while you're essentially in between other activities. And you're using your mobile device as your first device you're picking up and using. And this translates well in terms of we look at apps. Now, we specifically looked at Canadians preferring which apps they prefer to download. Now, this is not related directly to actual downloads. If you went on to some of the app stores, you might see some of the utility apps show up much higher in there. This is are what people are citing that they would prefer to download. And we're seeing all within the green there. It's all related to the fun and the social. So it's very much so around entertaining somebody versus the functional or the utility aspect of it. I'd argue that, maybe if more of the kind of functional or utility apps had a bit more fun built into them, you might see those numbers sort of change a little bit where they become a little more even across the board. Now, I have to touch on this because this is something that continues to be a question that we get asked a fair amount. It's continuously sort of a debate at various different conferences as well, is the idea of, do I build a mobile application or do I optimize my website to be mobile ready? And when we ask Canadians what they prefer, almost 60% said they prefer the mobile application versus the actual optimized website. Now, if you looked at those numbers straight out, you would obviously say to yourself, well, let's build an application. Although I'm not sure that's significant enough to say that, but it still would give you the indication that that's the majority. I think you have to look deeper at this and look at why are people preferring that. And when we do that, there's a clear indication it's about the richer and deeper experience that a mobile application provides than a mobile website currently. Now, we're starting to see new technologies coming on board, such as HTML5, for example, that can provide a much, much richer and deeper experience on the mobile device. There's just not enough of those sites that they're available at this point in time. In fact, there's a number of numbers that get thrown around nowadays, but I've heard anywhere between 10 and 20% of websites in Canada are really actually optimized for mobile browsing. And I think to myself, 10 to 20, wow, that seems incredible when you think about the penetration of this device and how fast it's picking up speed. And Dotmobi actually just reported this year that of the top 500,000 websites in the world, only 19% have been optimized for mobile browsing. Again, just incredible in terms of the difference of these numbers when you think about how fast the mobile space is growing. And last stat I just want to throw out as well, if you're thinking about apps versus websites, from a gender split perspective, men like apps, women prefer mobile websites. I'd love to dig into that one and learn a little bit more about that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about mobile marketing, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I'm going to touch on it a little bit. Forrester actually just came out with a report just recently, and in terms of speaking to marketers across North America, and just to better understand, how they're leveraging or not leveraging the mobile channel. And really the big thing that came out of that was the fact that, they're not really seeing, marketers in general, are not really seeing that mobile is truly a channel they can monetize yet. There are really numbers against it, and the reality is they still are small in the sense of people actually being able to do that. I argue still there needs to be deeper education across the consumer base to help them better understand the real possibilities of the mobile device.